I have said to you many times that when we have parables read to us and hear the stories of Jesus, there is a surface meaning that's there for us, but always when we get into these stories and into these parables, we discover that there is something much deeper than on the surface. And I think that is very true today in our gospel reading for Advent, in this parable of the 10 bridesmaids. And if I was to give a theme to this, I would say that one of the themes that goes a little bit deeper in our Advent season is knowing our place within our spiritual life and knowing our spiritual resources. Now that will become a little bit more obvious when I move along in this homily. I will also say at the beginning that there's two things in this parable that I do not like, and I would love to change them, and that probably means that it's a good parable. Because if you don't like it and it bothers you, Jesus did his job, and he did his job this time for me. I'll get to that in a minute as well. I want to start with a story, and I've probably shared this story with you before, but I want to share it now because I think it points out what I'm going to try to say to you today. You might remember me telling you the story of my youngest daughter when she was just about 1 year old and had just learned to walk. I was changing her diaper, and I noticed that there was a sort of a little bite on her calf. And we had been camping that weekend, and I thought, oh God, she's either got a spider bite or an insect bite. Well, by the next day, it was triple the size of what it was when I first saw it. And then by the end of the day, it was even bigger than that. And so we began to panic, and we called the doctor, and he said, well, you better bring her in, I need to look at that. So the doctor took one look at it and turned gray, and looked very serious, and he said, I'm going to send you to a specialist. And so off we went to the specialist, and we went that afternoon. The specialist saw us. He took one look at it, and he turned gray, and he said, I'd like to just take a needle, and just aspirate that bed, see if I can get a little fluid off it. Well, he never got a drop. So he looked at us very seriously, and he said, I'm booking her for surgery tomorrow, because this is a tumor, and we need to find out whether this is malignant or not. And you need to know that if it's malignant, here are some choices you have. We can leave it there and give her chemotherapy. We can take it out and probably follow it up with more therapy. And you may have to face the fact that the leg will come off. That's one of those times when you just sort of go blank. And you don't hear, you don't see, you just go blank. And all I can remember thinking was, well, I don't know what we're doing here, but you're not taking her leg off. That leg's not coming off. A 1-year-old, I can't face that. So she was booked for surgery. She had her surgery. They took a biopsy, sent it off, came back immediately, was negative. The doctor wasn't happy. He took another biopsy, sent it off for a second one. It came back negative. He said, I'm going to take a third one. So he took a third one, and it came back negative, and so they began to take it out. And by the time they were taking it out, it was beginning to attach to the muscle. That's how quickly and how fast this thing grew. When I was dealing with that, I realized, it came to my realization within a couple of days, that I did not have the spiritual resources to deal with that. I did not have the spiritual resources to look at death that seriously, because no one close to me in my life had died at that point. I did not have the spiritual resources to look at death and see life. I didn't have it. I knew I didn't. And so that began for me a journey to say that if I'm going to be serious about my Christian faith, I need to dig deeper. I need to find out how I would handle another scenario there. And so I began to do that. Now, some of you may think, well, is that why you're here now, preaching to us? I will say it's part of the reason. It's not the total reason. But I realized that I needed to find out what I really believed and where my spiritual resources were. And of course, that's a continual journey. The parable. The 10 bridesmaids, 5 foolish, 5 wise. It's always kind of bugged me, this parable. It is read at Advent because it's about waiting. And it's not just about waiting, it's about how you wait. You need to wait with diligence, and you need to be vigilant in how you wait. So, as the story goes, as the parable goes, we have 10 bridesmaids. And they have been summoned and told that there's going to be a wedding, and they're going to be the bridesmaids. So they better get their garments on, and they better be ready, and have their lamps ready. Because in those days, you were just told, this is going to be happening, but we're not telling you when. I understand that today, when young people have weddings now, they actually send out save the date times. You know, I didn't know that. Our son's getting married this June, and they're already sending out save the date things, invitations. So they're actually telling people when it's going to be. Back then they didn't tell you. They just said be ready. And you'd have to have your garment on, and you'd have to have your lamps trimmed. So this is what the 10 did. However, the bridegroom, it seems, was delayed. And so when it became to be midnight, they fell asleep. But they must have had one of them out watching. Because when he did come, somebody said, hey, wake up, he's here, let's go. So they jumped up, they trimmed their lamps, and 5 of them realized that they didn't bring enough oil. And so they said to the 5 others and said, give us some of your oil so we can go with you. And they said, no, you have to get your own. Go to the dealers and get yours. While they went, the 5 left with the bridegroom. They went to the wedding. The door was shut. Well, they did dutifully go, and they got their oil, and they came to the wedding, knocked on the door, and they were not allowed in. We do not know you. Here's my problem. When I study the parables and talk about the kingdom of God, I'm taught that we help other people. So I can't figure out why the 5 didn't help the other 5. Why didn't they give them some of the oil? Surely 5 lamps would have been enough light for the 10 of them if they got together. Can't figure that out. And the other is, I've always been taught and always believed, no one is turned away. No one who wants to get into the kingdom will be turned away. So why were they turned away? And you're going to be happy to know I don't have an answer for you. And again, your Advent homework is going to be live with this parable and see what you come up with. It bothers me. And I had actually one person at 8:30 come to me and say, well, I've been thinking about why they can't help. Because if you're taking your faith seriously, you really do have to be prepared. You wouldn't say to your children, well, you know, you got homework to do, but, you know, whether you do it or not, it doesn't matter. It's just you know you have to do it, but it's not that important. Well, it is. So our spirituality is important. It's very important. And we need to have certain resources. And we better figure out how we're going to get that. That's as far as I'll go there. Our journey group that we meet on Mondays. We're finished now for the season, but we started a book. Well, actually, it's a manual with a CD. It's by Kathleen Norris, and it's Living a Life That Matters is the title of it. And how it's set up is you put a CD on, and they have 5 different topics that they talk about. And Kathleen Norris is a poet, and she talks about each of the topics. We were talking about one of them that was why place matters. Why does your place matter? And when I first saw that, what do you mean place? Well, what she said is, you need to understand your place in the world. Where were you born? Who is your family? What was your birth order? Who were your children? Who were your other siblings? What country were you born in? What is your culture? What is your religion? All of those are a place for you, and you know that you fall into that place. So something else I want you to think about today is, what is your place? Because that has a lot to do with where you are now. For me, I was born in a Christian family. I was the second child of only 2 of us. I have an older sister. I could tell you about my family, but you don't want to hear about that. And I was brought up in a church. Our Baptist faith was very important to us, and that has had an effect on me. And we all have a home, don't we? Don't you love to come home after a long journey somewhere? You go away for a holiday and you have a wonderful time, and you walk in the front door and you go, it's great to be home. I can hardly wait to sleep in my bed tonight. I'm exhausted, and I want to make coffee the way I always make it. Gosh, the coffee where we were was terrible. I can hardly wait to have a cup of coffee, sleep in my bed, because this is my home. And that's important. That's very important. We all have a home. We have a place that we go, and it's important for us. And there's where we find stability. We find stability when we're at home. And that's just not our house. That's home here as well. So what Kathleen Norris was talking about, she brought up the fact that Benedictine monks, when they come into a cloister and join a community, they have to make two vows. The first vow is that this is their place and they will never leave here. This is their home now for the rest of their life. That's their vow. The other is a vow of conversion. And what that means is that, yes, you're here, you will always be in this community, you will never leave, but you have to be willing to learn other things. You can't stay where you are now, you have to move on and learn new things. And she said to us in this particular part that life for us is living a balance between those two things. The stability we find when we're home and reaching out and learning new things, and she calls that conversion. And she says about that, she said, you know, why is it that we have no problem with the constant changing of things in science, in medicine, in geography? She mentioned that one. We don't have any problem dealing with those things that change in our life. But why do we live and say, we're content, this is how she put it, we're content to live with the faith we were taught in Sunday school. As soon as somebody comes up to you and says, is that what you believe? Well, you know, I think there's something more to that. We say, don't tell me anything more. I learned this in Sunday school. I don't need to go anywhere else. I'm happy. I'm at home here. Don't bother me about that. If you are like that, you probably don't like me very well. Because I'm always pushing for something different. I'm saying that faith is not static, and faith itself is living in this balance of stability and conversion. Stability and conversion. So you go out and you learn new things, and then you come back to your stable life. So I say to you, this parable is really hits us in Advent, because it's about waiting, but it's about how we wait. And it bothers me to say that 5 of those bridesmaids were foolish. I don't think they were foolish. They did everything they were supposed to do. They had their garment. They fell asleep with all the rest of them. They woke up at the right time. They wanted to go. And they actually went to get the oil when they knew that that's what they needed. And they went and they knocked on the door to get in. So I want you to struggle with what you think that means. Now, my key here, and what I've worked out for myself, is that what's the key in this parable? And after I thought about it, I thought, well, it's the oil. It's the oil. That's the most important part for me. And what I think that represents is our spiritual resources. You see, they needed the oil to complete the journey. Well, not only complete it, to continue on, really, because we never complete our journey. But they needed the oil to get to the banquet. And what Jesus was trying to do, and I think this is what he would say to me if I ever get a chance to ask him, is what about that parable? He would say that if it's bothering you, that's good, because this is serious business. This really is serious. And when we approach Advent, as we do every year, it's serious. And we need to say to ourselves, what are my spiritual resources as I go through this Advent season? You know, it's wonderful. We come in and we light a candle of hope. Looks like it's gone out already. We'll fix that. We light that, and isn't it nice? And it's fun to watch the children run around with the shepherds and the wise men, and we'll decorate the thing. And isn't it wonderful? And I can hardly wait for Christmas. But you have to sit and say to yourself every year, what does this mean for me now? What is this? Do I have the resources now that I need to find my place in my spiritual life? And like I'll go back to my story about myself. That was the first time in my life, and I was going to church. That was the first time in my life I realized I don't have the resources to deal with this. They're just not there. I can't handle what might happen to my little baby girl. I can't handle that. And so what do I need to do to be able to look death in the eye and say, I see life? What is it to look at hopelessness and say, I see hope? What does it mean to look at darkness and say, I see light? Because those are all the images we use in Advent. This is the child of life. This is the child of light. This is the child that brings new birth to us. Well, what does that mean for me? I've been reading, I was saying to Lucy the other day, I've been reading articles that have been written in the Huron Church News and in the Anglican Journal, all these wonderful articles about Advent, using all the terms of light and life and all of this and all. And I'm thinking, yeah, but what? What does that mean for me? They're wonderfully written, and I think, but I have to figure more out than just read that article. I have to read, what does that light mean to me in my life? What does it mean? And that's what it means to go deeper. And that's why he told these stories, and he always left it with that little thing like, oh, why? Why didn't you let them in? They did what they were supposed to do. They were no different than the thief on the cross who said to Jesus, remember me in your kingdom. And he said, today you will be with me in paradise. Took him. The thief all his life. These bridesmaids, okay, they made a mistake. They went and got the oil. Why aren't they in? And so I would say to you, it's a good gospel. It's a good gospel. It's a good parable because we need to struggle with that. And we talk about all these images of light and hope and love and joy. We need to bring it here home. Here in your heart. And it would be great today if you spent some time and determined what your place is, not only in the world, but in here, spiritually. Where are you? Thanks be to God.